It is Easter Sunday. We are celebrating today with billions of Christians from every nation, tribe, and background all over the world, the resurrected Jesus, that he is alive. And today we are looking at not just any event in history, but we're looking at the ultimate event in all of human history. There is no other event that comes close, no other event that even draws near, no other event that inspires us more and is active and living than the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And we are here to worship him today, aren't we? We really are. I love reminding you of this, but the founders of every other world religion are dead. They're gone, and you can visit their shrines to this day. If you're Jewish, you can go to Hebron to visit the tomb of Abraham. If you're a Buddhist, you can go to India and visit the shrine to Buddha. If you're a Muslim, you can go to Medina and visit the tomb of Muhammad. But for Christians, for followers of Jesus, there's nowhere to go. There's no pilgrimage to make. There's no place where we can commemorate him because the grave couldn't hold him. He's not in the ground. He's alive forevermore. That's where he is. As Christians, as followers of Jesus, we have always been a resurrection people. And I'm not just talking about a metaphorical resurrection or a symbolic resurrection or a psychological resurrection, but we believe in a physical resurrection and a historic resurrection from the dead. In fact, Christians, from the very beginning, were convicted to their core that Jesus physically rose from the dead, and that matters. There's a first century historian named Josephus, and Josephus is marking what the earliest Christians were doing, what they were believing, and how they were following Jesus. Here's what he says. He says, "About this time lived Jesus, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man. For he was the achiever of extraordinary deeds, and was a teacher of those who accept the truth gladly. He won over many Jews and many of the Greeks. He was the Messiah. When he was indicted by the principal men among us, and Pilate condemned him to be crucified, those who had come to love him originally did not cease to do so, for he appeared to them on the third day restored to life. As the prophets of the deity had foretold these and countless other marvelous things about him, and the tribe of the Christians, so named after him, has not disappeared to this day." It's amazing here. We have a non-Christian historian looking at the earliest Christians and what they believed, and he recognizes that from the very beginning of the Christian faith, we have been a people who believed in a physical resurrection. Not just a symbol, not just a myth, but he really did rise from the grave. And for us as believers, this is the ultimate event on which everything hangs. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 17, that if Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile and you're still in your sins. What Paul is saying here is that if the physical resurrection of Jesus did not take place, the life, the teachings, the death of Jesus on Good Friday accomplished absolutely hee-haw. That's a Scottish word for nothing. It did nothing without the resurrection. In fact, if the bones of Jesus Christ were to be found today, if his teeth were to be found in the ground today, it would render all of Christianity and all of its implications into today and everything we know utterly useless. That's what Paul's saying. It's quite the claim, isn't it? We would simply be wild animals in a meaningless world fighting to survive. Human rights, ethics, law and order, and all of these other things that we take for granted would simply cease to exist. You see, for Christians, human rights and moral agency are not plucked out of the air, but they come from a standard who is a living God and who's alive. For Christians, it's either the resurrection or it's nihilism. We love to teach our children moral absolutes, don't we? And one of my all-time favorite moral absolutes that we love to teach children in song in Scotland is this: "You can't shove your granny off the bus. You can't shove your granny off the bus. You can't shove your granny because she's your mammy's mammy. You can't shove your granny off the bus. Well, I want to ask the question, if the resurrection never happened, why can't you shove your granny off the bus? If we are living in a meaningless world that is just about survival and your grand's costing you a fair bit of money, listen, that double-decker bus, a wee push, would probably make a lot of sense. But we don't believe in that because we have a living God through which all moral standards come, who's alive, and we know because of that, every human being is made in his image. And without God, none of that happens. Here's my favorite Easter quote. It's by Professor Yaroslav Pelikan, Yale University. And by the way, if you're a granny, don't worry. Everything's going to be okay. Here's what he says. If Christ is not risen, nothing else matters. And if Christ is risen, nothing else matters. It's the only thing that truly matters. It's the only reality through which we can understand, see, and live within the world. We're going to be in Luke chapter 24 today, and we're going to be from verse 1 to 12. It will be coming up on the screen in just a few moments. You know, we're blessed as Christians because we have 4 gospel accounts of this story of the empty tomb. And that's quite something. I studied history at university, and I was used to dealing with source material and early sources. And to have 4, not just 1, not just 2, but 4 sources that surround the same event and the same characters and the same people, historians actually find that pretty drool-worthy. In fact, in the ancient times, there's not many more people or situations or events that took place that would have as much historical sources for us to work from. Historians all agree that Jesus really did live, that he did die a death on Good Friday by crucifixion, and that he was buried in the tomb. Most historians agree that Paul and the early apostles, that they really did believe they had seen the physical resurrected Jesus. And if the historians don't believe themselves that the resurrection took place, they are quite unable to give us an alternative explanation of the events written down. C.F.D. Moule from Cambridge University says that the birth and the rapid rise of the Christian church remain an unsolved enigma for any historian who refuses to take seriously the only explanation offered by the church itself. And this morning we're going to look at one of these source materials in the Gospel of Luke. Jesus has been crucified. He's been buried. We're a few days on in the Sunday now. People are grieving as we open up this story. So let's read together Luke chapter 24, verse 1 to 12. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking the spices they had prepared, and they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they went in, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were perplexed about this, behold, 2 men stood by them in dazzling apparel. And as they were frightened and bowed their faces to the ground, the men said to them, "Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here, but he is risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified and on the 3rd day rise." And they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene and Joanna, the Mary, the mother of James, and the other woman with them who told these things to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter rose and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves. And he went home marveling at what had happened. Can I just say, church, this is a story that we should be marveling at. This is a moment and an event that should almost catch our breath. I mean, I know that we talk about the resurrection a lot, but there's something about the resurrected Jesus when we think and dwell on it that we just marvel, just like Peter. Here they were 3 days later. They are in deep grief. Jesus died the most painful and the most shameful of deaths on the cross. There was no way that Jesus had not fully and completely died. He had been buried in a tomb. And here the women are going to the tomb with spices because the smell of a tomb would have been so horrendous. And as they get there, to their shock, the tomb's open. The stone's been rolled away. As they go into the tomb, two angels appear to them and they say, "Why are you searching for the living among the dead? He isn't here. He's risen." Don't you remember what Jesus told you? I love that Jesus was dropping clues, doesn't it? And we all are in on the clues. We get it. But these guys had no idea. And here they're shocked by this. They're fearful angels. They run back to the now 11 disciples because Judas has committed suicide. And as they get to the 11 disciples are looking at the women going, "You're just hysterical and full of grief, right? You're seeing things. This isn't right." But Peter, and I love Peter. Peter gets up. He says, I'm just going to check this out for myself. And he runs to the grave. And as he gets into the grave, the stone's rolled away. He stoops into the grave, and all that is left is the shroud, the linen shroud where Jesus would have been. There's no body to be found. And he walks away marveling at this. Guys, what we've just read it's the ultimate event in human history. Nothing else compares or comes close to this moment. It's a claim that goes against everything we know. It goes against all the laws of nature and all physics as we know it. There's no possible way that this could have happened, right? Like, how could a man rise from the dead? And we claim that, and we expect people to believe it, but it's a ridiculous claim, isn't it? Like, it's totally nuts that we believe somebody physically rose from the grave. You see, if somebody was to rise from the grave, it would have to be the one who created the laws of nature and holds physics within the palms of his hand. And yet that's the claim that we make, that Jesus rose from the grave. Now, I want to share with you this morning 4 reasons why this is a reasonable thing to believe, and 3 reasons why it matters for you. But can I just say, Christian, if you're already a follower of Jesus, the primary way that you know Jesus is alive is because the Spirit of God lives inside you. And he testifies to you that it's true. It says in the Bible that the Holy Spirit leads us into all truth. The primary way that any of us were saved and came to the knowledge of the death and the resurrection of Jesus was an incredible work of the Spirit of God working in our hearts and opening up our spiritual eyes to have a conviction that Jesus truly is alive. But that being said, I do believe that there are other historical evidences that make this claim rational and reasonable to at least consider. And I'll take you through these 4. I've got maybe 10, 15 of these, but I always come back to these 4 because they're just my favorite ones. I'm sure you've all got your own favorite ones, but here there are 4 things I want to point out. The first is simply this, is that the woman found the empty tomb. You cannot overstate the importance of this. In all 4 Gospels, it mentions that it wasn't the men, it wasn't the leaders, but it was the women who found the tomb. It's hard to get a number of women because there are so many Marys here. There's 4 Marys. Sounds like the start of a joke, doesn't it? 4 Marys walk into a tomb. There's Mary Magdalene. There's Mary, the mother of Jesus. There's Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. And there's Mary, the wife of Clopas. Yeah, there's a lot of Marys. In addition, there's Joanna and Salome. And so there's around 6 or 7 women at least that we know of who've gone to the tomb on this day. And that's significant. It's very significant because if you were trying to make up a story in this time, if you were trying to create a myth or a narrative that was actually believable, never in a million years would you have had women finding finding the empty tomb and finding this experience. In the first century, women were seen as absolutely second class, not to believe people, right? We don't see them in the same way as we would see men. Josephus tells us that women weren't actually able to testify in a court of law. And actually, groups of women, multiple women, wouldn't even be listened to in a court of law. And I quote, because of the levity and the boldness of their sex. Some of you are like, yes, that's me. I've got levity and boldness of their sex. Celsus, the 2nd century critic of Christianity, he mocked the fact that Mary Magdalene was the first person to meet Jesus. And he actually said that Mary Magdalene was a hysterical female deluded by sorcery. It kind of tells you everything you need to know about people's view of women at the time. There's nothing about this story that would have been believable, that would have been in any way at the time like this is something we should listen to. The only reason you would have women finding the empty tomb is if it really did happen. It's the only reason. Secondly, resurrection's a completely new idea. Now, I know that's hard for us because we live in a resurrection worldview. We swim in the waters of Christianity. It's everywhere. It's in our popular culture. I always think of Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. You know, he's dead and he comes back. Aslan in the Chronicles of Narnia. Or even all of the Avengers when Thanos clicks his finger and suddenly everyone comes back. We are used to resurrections. We kind of expect resurrections, but that wasn't always the case. And this time, resurrection was a new idea altogether. It's like something that hadn't been in anyone's minds. Nobody was expecting it. And yet, out of nowhere, the idea suddenly seems to emerge. It's hard for us to understand this, but I suppose it would be kind of like living in the 1600s, and you're sitting there, and you just come up with the idea of the internet. You know, nobody's thinking it. Nobody's thought of computers. There's no grid within the mind to be able to conceptually understand this. And yet here in the middle where there is nothing that people are able to hold on to, suddenly the idea of resurrection appears out of nowhere. N.T. Wright says that nobody in the pagan world of Jesus' day and thereafter actually claimed that somebody had been truly dead and then had come to be truly and bodily alive once more. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, what about Lazarus? Aren't you? And if you're not thinking that now, you are thinking that because I've just planted it in your mind. Because we've been looking at Lazarus the last couple of weeks, and we all feel very sorry for Lazarus, don't we? Because he had died, and he was in heaven sipping heavenly cocktails with a massive vista, thinking, this is wonderful. And then, boom, he wakes up, and he's not woken up back into the land with iPads and air conditioning and running water. He's put back into a dusty, horrible, poverty-ridden town, and he now has to walk out the rest of his days. Within a few days, there's a death threat against him, and he's going to die again. Everyone thinks Lazarus was a great story. I think for Lazarus, he must have just been thinking, this is a bit unfair. Yeah, I'm going to go through death twice. You see, Lazarus wasn't a resurrection in the way that we see Jesus resurrected. It was a resuscitation in the sense that he was given the same body that he'd had before. Jesus dies once, and as he is raised, he is given a new body, and it is the body that he still has today. That right now he sits at the right hand of the Father, fully God, fully man, irrevocably committed to the human race, and he sits there with the same body. That's what resurrection means. And this would have been entirely unconvincing at the time. There were two primary worldviews that this idea finds its way into. The first was the Greek worldview. And the Greeks at the time hated the body. I know you bodybuilders are out there thinking, how could the Greeks hate the body, you know? If they saw me, they'd love it, you know? They'd be fine. But the Greeks hated the body. The Greeks had this idea that if we could only get rid of the body's the thing that holds us back. If we can gain a level of knowledge and understanding about the world, then our souls will leave the body and we will finally be free of it. And yet the Christian message comes in and says, no, there's a resurrection from the dead and the body's still there. It's a physical thing. And the Greeks are going, that's disgusting. If you were trying to make the story up to persuade the Greeks, this was not the one to do it with. Absolutely not. And then we have the Jewish worldview. The Jewish worldview. Now, the Jews believed in a resurrection from the dead, but their resurrection from the dead came at the end of all time, and at the end of things. It certainly didn't come in the middle of history. This was completely new to the disciples. The first time in history this idea has kind of popped up out of nowhere. Now, I think Mary Magdalene was probably a pretty intelligent person. But I'm going to hazard just a bet that she wasn't shooting 300 in her IQ test. Because in a moment, in an instant, if she made this up, she made a story up that has shaped the entirety of Roman Empire, Charlemagne and the entirety of the building of Europe, the Reformation, and almost everything that we know today came out of this one woman. I'm not sure, and forgive me, Mary, if I'm wrong, I'm not sure she was smart enough to do that. I'm just going to hazard a bet. You see, this story of resurrection would have not been in any way, shape, or form convincing to anyone at the time. If you were to make up a story where you were trying to start a religion, this would not have been it. The only way and reason you would do this is because it actually happened and it looked like this. That could be Jesus ringing right now because he's alive, isn't he? I was just thinking, like, Calum, just rein it in. Mary's got a problem with you. Listen, resurrection's a new idea. Thirdly, this is for me is the most mind-blowing thing. Jesus' family worshipped him as God. Now, I've got 2 brothers. And I love my brothers very, very much. But if either one of them came to me and claimed to be the Messiah, God in the flesh, they'd be getting a good old-fashioned wedgie. There's no way I would let that happen, right? In fact, even if they rose from the grave and they proved that to me, I'd still be giving them a wedgie, right? I would still be attempting that. I can't imagine being the brother of Jesus. I mean, talk about a high-achieving big brother. His mother, Joseph and Mary, you can imagine saying to the brothers, James, sorry we missed your football match today. Jesus was turning water into wine, James, listen, could you just make your way home from school? He's just raised 3 people from the dead and all the demons are being cast out. You'd be sitting there as Jesus' little brother with probably some issues. Let's put it this way. He probably deserved counseling or some kind of time just to go through some of the issues that he had. But it amazes me that the family of Jesus worshipped him. It doesn't start out this way. Let's look at the journey of James in 3 verses. In John 7, verse 5, it says this, "For not even his brothers believed in him." At the beginning, as Jesus is teaching and going around with his disciples, and he's claiming to be the Messiah, and he's doing these miracles, James is sitting in the pub with his mates on a Friday night, and all of his mates are slagging him off because you've got the crazy brother who thinks he's the Messiah. And you imagine James just sitting there going, "Oh, Jesus, please just rein it in. Rein it in." They didn't actually believe who Jesus said he was or what Jesus was doing. In the second verse, this is after the death of Jesus, it says, "Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles." I'm sure that just solidified all of James's problems psychologically as a little brother, wouldn't it? It's like, oh no, here he is now. He's not just dead. I thought for a minute I was going to be the favorite child. I thought for a moment Mom and Dad were going to start giving me some attention. And as Jesus rises, he appears to James in his resurrected body, fully alive, right? Like, I can imagine Jesus looking at James saying, "I told you so. I am superior. Call me Lord." That's what I would do for my wee brothers. You can, don't call me Calum anymore. You can call me Lord God. And after he sees this physical Jesus, his brother in the flesh, in a new body, resurrected, we see the effects of this in Acts 1, verse 14. This is the gathering of the early church. It says, "All these with one accord were devoting themselves to prayer, together with the women and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and his brothers." Isn't it amazing the power of an encounter with the resurrected Jesus? I don't know where you are or what you're doubting, but when the resurrected Jesus shows up and makes himself real to you, things change in our lives and our hearts really quickly. They do. And here James goes from a place of going, I don't believe Jesus, to worshiping his own brother. I don't think I could bring myself to do it. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go to hell. James goes on to lead the early church in Jerusalem for many years. And Josephus, the historian, actually marks the death of James. And James is proclaiming in his death the resurrection of his brother. That's amazing, isn't it? What a transformation from the resurrected Jesus. It brings us on to our fourth bit of evidence, and that's just Christian martyrdom. Some say this was psychosis. Some say it was just a mass hallucination, that it's just a myth or it's just made up. But the trouble with that is you don't die and get tortured on the basis of hallucination. Very quickly in the book of Acts, we see that Christian martyrdom was taking place. It begins with the stoning of Stephen. And very quickly after that, people were being tortured and killed because they would not recant that Jesus rose from the grave. Many of the principal eyewitnesses to the resurrection of Jesus did die because they claimed that Jesus was resurrected. You see, we know that people will die for a cause, for an ideology, for something that would wire them and bring them in that place. But these men and women did not die for an ideology. They died for a set of facts. They went to their grave rather than saying that the facts were untrue. They died because they said that the facts of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus was a conviction for them that he really did physically rise from the dead. Simon Greenleaf, professor of law at Harvard University, he says that it would be impossible that they could have persisted in affirming the truths that they have narrated had not Jesus actually risen from the dead. And had they not known this fact as certainly as they knew any other fact. And today, on Easter Sunday today, there's still people around the world who are being killed and tortured for their faith. We know this. We pray regularly for the persecuted church. We work with Open Doors. We know this. We know this. That instead of recanting and saying he didn't rise from the dead, I didn't know him, people are still, through the Spirit of God, being convicted enough to say, no, he did rise. He's still alive. Even to this day, people are walking through that. Now, I could go on with these. I could add 4, 5, 6, 7 more. You fancy it? Well, we just keep going until the end of the second service, will we? But you're like, okay, there's maybe something to think about. Maybe that's reasonable, but a good question to ask is simply, why does it matter? Why does it matter to you today that he actually rose from the grave? How does it impact you? What does it do? Well, the first thing and the most important thing is simply this. God's not dead. He's not dead. Do you remember the Sunday school song? God's not dead. No, he is alive. God's not dead. No, he is alive. God's not dead. No, he is alive. I feel him all over me. Isn't that amazing that God's not dead? That means something. It means something. It means that your prayers are heard. It means that you can know him. It means that you can have a living relationship with God. See, you can't talk to Abraham. You can't pray to Muhammad. You can't speak to Buddha because they're dead. They're gone. But we have a living God who's alive right now, who sees you, he knows you, and he can speak to you. Isn't that an amazing thing that we have a living faith in God? And if you don't know Jesus, I want you to know that if you come to him, you can find a God who isn't dead, but he's a God who is alive. Like, we are not having a memorial service today. We're here to worship him. And as we were singing today, we believe as Christians that he hears us. He hears us and he's like, oh, it's a bit flat. Could you rein that bit in? But he hears what we're singing. He's alive. Secondly, and this is important, you will rise. You will rise. You know, Christian, the incarnation of Christ as God came in the flesh was really about God becoming like us. But the resurrection of Jesus was actually about us becoming like him. And sometimes we miss this. We sometimes miss it. Now, in our culture, we love zombies, don't we? We've got a cultural fascination with them. World War Z, do you remember that film that was shot in George Square in Glasgow? There's a lot of different TV shows that are about zombies. Why is it that we're excited about zombies? My friend, it was a guy I knew who worked in a morgue, and he used to tie dead people's feet together. He said that just if there's ever a zombie apocalypse, at least they're not going to be able to catch us, right? And so I thought, gosh, I'm never sending any of my loved ones to you. Why is it we're fascinated with zombies? I think it's simply a pale and fake and hollow imitation of a much more glorious reality. A much more glorious reality. Paul says that as Christians, when we die, we're absent from the body, but we're present with the Lord. That we go to be with him. This is called the intermediate state, or Randy Alcorn, he wrote a book on heaven. He calls it the present heaven, which I think is just a great way of saying it. This is where everyone we know, everyone we love who has followed Jesus is right now. That we leave our body in the ground and our spirit goes to be in the presence of Jesus. It says in Ecclesiastes 12, verse 7, that the dust returns to the ground it came from and the spirit returns to the God who gave it. And this isn't a secondary rubbish place. It's an incredible place. Jesus says to the thief on the cross who's with him, today you'll be with me in paradise. That this is a place where there is no pain, there are no tears, it is only pleasures within the presence of God himself. And that is where all of our loved ones who have known Jesus are just now. Jesus teaches on this. He says, in my Father's house, there are many rooms. Now, the word room there, I always think of this is going to be a huge mansion for me, you know. But the word room here doesn't mean, it's not a forever word. It's in the original language, it really means a temporary holding place. It's like if you were to travel to Cali and you decide, okay, I'm going to stop in a travel lodge in London overnight. It's like the travel lodge isn't the destination. You might just sleep there for a night and then move on to the destination, which is Cali. Here's hoping heaven's better than Cali anyway. Thank you, Jesus. Yes, amen. And we've got this idea of it just being a passing place. You are not designed by God to be a floating Teletubby for the rest of your life. Some of you are trying right now, aren't you? You're like, will I go? You're not designed by God, but like that. It's not going to be boring where you're just floating around like an ethereal cloud face in the sky, not doing much. But it's just a temporary holding place, because when Christ returns to the earth, the Bible tells us, just as Christ was raised, so too you will be raised in bodies. Here's what it says in 1 Corinthians 15:51. Behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and they shall be changed. ECF, I want to tell you, this is good news, that on that day, you will be raised with a new body. A new body. He goes on to say, or he says before this, there are heavenly bodies and earthly bodies. I think I've got a heavenly one right now, no? There's a heavenly bodies and earthly bodies. But the glory of the heavenly is of one kind, and the glory of the earthly is of another. There is one glory of the sun, and another glory of the moon, and another glory of the stars, for star differs from star in glory. Jesus was raised with a new body. It's like he was the same, but he was different. You remember when he appears to the disciples on the road to Emmaus, and on Emmaus it's like they don't quite recognize it, and yet it was him in a new body, in a new form. And here we see that we are going to be given a new body. In verse 37 of that passage it says, what you sow is not what you sow is not the body that is to be. So as you die, you're not going to wake up in the same body like Lazarus, right? If you are old and your foot's not working just now, when you are raised from the dead, you're not still going to have that broken down foot. What you sow is not the body that is to be, but a bare kernel, perhaps of wheat or some other grain. But God gives it a body as he has chosen, and each kind of seed its own body. We have the idea here that our bodies are being planted in the ground, like an acorn or like a little seed that's just been dropped into the ground. And what comes out of the ground will be something far more glorious. We've got this absolutely ginormous monkey puzzle tree in the front of our house. And it's a really handy thing because we can just say to people, it's the monkey puzzle tree house, and they'll find it. But it's absolutely ginormous. And it was planted about 90 years ago. And it was planted in just a little tiny pot. And it has grown to being like almost illegal in its size. It's very, very huge. And I am worried about the roots underneath our property. It's absolutely ginormous. And just like that, we will be planted into the ground, but something different will emerge. You will have a different type of body. Now, that seems a bit weird, doesn't it? You're like, how could I look different or be different? How could my body be a different type of glory? And if you're thinking that, what to do this afternoon is to go in through the drawers, find your school yearbook photo, and take a little look at the photo. You're going to find there the same version of you, slightly different body. Maybe more spotty, maybe you've grown, maybe there's more gray hair. Like we have, it's the same you, but the body has changed. The body's changed. Let me tell you, child of God, maybe you're sick of cancer. Maybe you're sick of brokenness, of body aches. Maybe you're sick of all of the things that just get into your soul and into your life and into the body and into the hands. Maybe you're fed up of arthritis. There's a new body coming for you. D.A. Carson says that there's nothing you are suffering from that a good resurrection can't fix. Isn't that good news? That sickness will be no more. That all of it will be gone. That you will be raised imperishable like a can of tin soup. You're going to just stay forever, right? Like it's not going to rot. It's not going to change, but you will be changed. George Herbert says this. He said that death used to be an executioner, but the gospel has made him just a gardener. That all that's going to happen to you when you die is that you will be planted. And as you're planted in the ground, we will be waiting for that day when Christ returns. And when he returns, it will be a physical resurrection from the dead. We will be standing with people who we love. We will be there worshiping together, every tongue, tribe, nation from all over the world physically before the physical risen Christ. It is a physical gospel. It's not just a metaphor. Finally, all things will be renewed. All things will be made new. In Revelation 21, verse 1 to 5, it says this. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. And he who was seated on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new. All things new. Do you know what the Greek is for all things new? All things new. It's all things. It's all things. Sometimes we think of heaven as this ethereal, floaty, we're like Greek in our thinking, but it's not. It's a physical reality that every bit of creation will be changed and renewed. That in this world, as we look at the headlines and we look at the brokenness and we look at the wars and we look at the poverty, as we look at the physical challenges, the earth creaking under the pressure and the weight of our fallenness and our fallen sin, if that gets to your souls, let me tell you, all things are going to be made new. And it was secured by this event when Jesus rose from the grave. There'll be no more vaccines, no more hospitals, no more corrupt political institutions, no more cancer, no more diabetes, no more heart conditions, no more starvation, no more wheelchairs, no more drought, no more flooding, no more war, no more betrayal, no more cursing, no more broken relationships, because he will be here alive, sitting on a throne, the King of Kings, physically ruling and reigning with perfection over this physical world. All of creation will have changed. That's the power of the resurrection. That's why it matters, and that's why it impacts you. You see, the resurrection is everything. It is the ultimate event in the chambers and the echoes of all of human history, so much so that forever and ever we will get around the throne of the Lamb who was slain, and we will thank him. We will say, you are worthy, God. You're so worthy, God. It won't ever leave us, because this event had eternal power, and it will live through us. We will be living within the bodies that came through the power of this one moment in the grave when Jesus breathed. So too will we. The resurrection's everything. Church, you have got legitimate reasons, you really do, to believe that this is true. God's not dead. You've got a new body coming, and he's going to make everything new. He's risen. Happy Easter.